went to the Senate, replacing Bob Dole when he resigned to continue his presidential campaign. And then he returned to Kansas, being elected governor in 2010. He lives in Topeka with his wife and his family. Representative Paul Davis is a Democrat in this race. He's an attorney, first elected to the Kansas House in 2002. He was elected by his party colleagues to serve as the House Minority Leader in 2008, a position that he held until he decided to retire and run for governor. He lives in Lawrence with his wife and his daughter. And the Libertarian candidate in this race is Keen Umbehr, who is an attorney and a former small businessman. Prior to running for governor, he unsuccessfully pursued a seat in the Kansas House. He lives in Alma with his wife, and he has grown children and grandchildren. Now, before we proceed any further, just a little handy reminder to do it with me. Take your cell phones and put them on mute. I think I've already done that with mine, but here it is. Everybody, hush, hush. Now let's begin the program with the opening statements from the candidates. Candidates drew lots prior to this event for the batting order, for lack of a better interpretation. Candidates will have 3 minutes each. We are going to start with the drawing that has Governor Brownback first. Brownback, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. Thank you all for being here today. It's going to be a lively, good debate. Hopefully not quite as lively as the state fair. That one was really pretty raucous. And I have to congratulate Kansas State University on a great game last night against Auburn. Should have won it. We'll get it next time. Keen, Paul, glad to have you guys here. Concerning Johnson County, your priorities, they've always been very clear, and they're the same priorities I have. Great schools, a vibrant economy. With that, you have built a robust county that is leading the way in growth. My priorities are the same: great schools, a vibrant economy. I worked hard for greater local authority for your school districts, for our school districts, and earlier this year, we in this room, because a lot of you in this room did this, won an additional 2% for district local option budgets. That's something you'd sought for 15 years. You hadn't been able to get it prior. It passed. I signed it into law. Representative Davis, the Democrat leader in the House, voted against that final bill and did not propose a local option budget in his proposal. And when it comes to talking overall about Johnson County and schools, Representative Davis talks a lot about more money for schools, but he's not talking about your schools. He is talking about your money. When it comes to having a vibrant economy, again, my policies are very clear, simple. I want lower taxes and less regulations, and it's working. More Kansans are working now than ever before in the history of the state. Right here in Johnson County, you have great growth taking place with cranes and cones everywhere. Keep it going. Small business income here is growing at an annual rate of 7%. Right across the line in Jackson County, it's decreasing. You are leading the Kansas comeback. Now let's talk about taxes. Paul Davis says he'd appoint a blue ribbon committee to tell him what to think about on tax policy. You deserve clarity now, and while I'm governor, we will never impose a sales tax on services. Period. We will not do that. With Paul Davis, you'll get a sales tax on services. He's never seen a tax increase he didn't like. Joan Wagner has already proposed and drafted a sales tax on services and residential utilities. Paul has proposed over $1 billion of additional spending to implement Obamacare. But he refuses to answer questions on how he's going to pay for it. That's because he doesn't want you to know the truth. The truth is he's going to come to Johnson County to pay for it. I look forward to a robust discussion because I think it's important to get specifics and you know where this state is going. Thank you, and it's been a pleasure serving you as governor for these 4 years, and I look forward to an additional 4 years.
Folks, no applause, please, because we're on a tight time schedule here, so hold it off for the end. Thank you very much. Our next opening remarks come from the Libertarian candidate, Keen Umbehr. Mr. Umbehr?
Thank you very much, and I want to thank you for coming here today. I want to especially thank the Johnson County Chamber of Commerce for having this event. This is the first time Kansas will get to hear from a Libertarian candidate. We've been excluded from debates in the past, we're excluded from debates in the future, and this might possibly be the only debate where the Libertarian candidate will be on the stage with Mr. Davis and Mr. Brownback. Today, you're going to hear each one of us give our policy proposals. And if you feel dumber after hearing the answers, that means that we didn't answer the question. Now, I'm an attorney. Mr. Davis is an attorney. Mr. Brownback's an attorney. We have an obligation to make our policies clear. Today, you're going to hear a lot about Mr. Brownback's income tax. Today, you're going to hear my views on why it's unfair. Why it's unfair for 1.4 million wage earners. And you're going to hear my plan to change that. And we have to make the taxes, income tax fair. 191,000 of us business owners, which I am one of them, we get to pay zero income tax. If you're one of the wage earners, and I suspect almost everybody in this room is at some point, you pay all the taxes. And we can talk about Mr. Brownback's desire to shave the rates down, but nobody can appreciate that. Nobody's really getting any more money in their pocket. We have to talk about money first. We got to talk about this tax plan first. Before we talk about schools, before we talk about our Kansas economy, before we talk about renewable portfolio standards, before we talk about anything, we have to get the money issue done first. So, listen closely. Thank you for your attention. I appreciate you being here. It's going to be a lively debate. You're going to hear three different opposite views, and you're going to have to decide which one is best for you and your family. Thank you.
And now, Mr. Davis.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you to the local chambers here in Johnson County for giving us this opportunity. I'm Paul Davis. I'm a moderate, a common sense leader. I'm an independent thinker. When I got out of school, one of the first things that I did was I joined my local chamber. I got involved. During my time in the private sector, I've helped people start businesses. I've helped small businesses grow, and I've represented some of the largest companies in the state, many of which are here in Johnson County. During that time, I've come to believe that government and business don't always have to be adversaries. We can be partners. We can help communities grow together, and we can move our state forward. A great example of this is our infrastructure. In 2010, I was one of the people who put together the bipartisan coalition for our 10-year comprehensive transportation plan. 3 different economic studies show that plan will create 175,000 jobs over the life of its plan. Unfortunately, Governor Brownback has taken $1 billion out of that proven job-creating program to subsidize his economic experiment that just isn't working. We can't continue to go in this direction. I believe we need to have a balanced and reasonable tax policy. During my 12 years in the legislature, I have voted over 150 times to cut taxes. I voted to get rid of the estate tax, corporate franchise tax, property tax on business machinery and equipment. I voted to cut the corporate income tax because we needed to stay competitive with Missouri. And I have always been an opponent of a sales tax on services, and I always will be, because it will be detrimental to Johnson County. We're going to confront the issues that are before our state. We're going to have to work together. We're going to have to work together as Democrats and Republicans. For 12 years, I have been able to build bipartisan coalitions. That's why I have the support of over 100 current and former Republican elected officials. Folks like Senate President Dick Bond, Bud Burke, Speaker of the House, Wendell Lady. I also know the key ingredient to the success story of Johnson County: great public schools. I have been a champion for our public schools. I have consistently supported more local authority for Johnson County schools, and I will continue to do that as governor. And I will make my very top priority restoring the cuts that have been made to our public schools, because strong public schools are the very foundation of a stronger economy. Thank you, and I look forward to questions.
And it is time for questions now. Hold your applause, please. And these questions have been developed by the Johnson County Public Policy Council. They have not been seen by the candidates. Obviously, each of the candidates are going to have 90 seconds, a minute and a half, to respond to these questions. The first one, gentlemen, is the fact, as you well know, one of the major responsibilities of the governor of the state of Kansas is to propose a budget. As you well know, by law, it needs to be balanced. Don't have any choice in that. And so what would your highlights be in your budget? We're going to start with our Libertarian candidate, Mr. Robert. Robert?
Well, thank you very much. I love this question. This year, the Kansas legislature passed and the governor signed our largest budget we've ever had in the history of Kansas, $15.352 billion. Now let's remember in 2014 when we had a $14.6 billion budget, we didn't have enough revenue to meet that budget. Why not? Well, it was the governor's income tax plan. We're going to talk a lot about this plan, and we have to keep coming back to it because that's why we don't have enough money. 191,000 of us pay zero income tax. I'm an attorney, I run my own business, sole proprietorship, we pay zero. Same with LLCs, all the pass-through companies. In order to make our budget, we have to change something. We have to pass the Kansas Fair Tax. The Kansas Fair Tax was submitted to the legislature last year. It's House Bill 2625. It's not perfect legislation. It's going to need some work. But what it does is it repeals income tax for everyone. Repeals corporate tax, sales tax, and in its place institutes a 5.7% consumption tax on goods and services. We're going to talk more about this, and I appreciate this opportunity.
Mr. Davis.
A budget is a reflection of priorities, and my top priority has always been our public schools. Fortunately, when Governor Brownback came to office, that wasn't his top priority. He made the largest cut to public school funding in state history, and our schools have seen the effects of this. I talked to a school teacher the other day in Shawnee Mission who told me she's got over 30 kids in her class. She can't even get a paraprofessional. That is not how we are going to grow our economy. You know, the Overland Park Chamber in its 2014 legislative priorities said straightforwardly that educational excellence is one of the single most important reasons companies have selected Johnson County as their place for business. You all have built a tremendously successful model, and we in Topeka need to help you take that model to the next level. The problem with our budget is that Governor Brownback has put us in $1.3 billion of debt over the next 5 years. That comes from our Legislative Research Department, and he's unwilling to acknowledge it. And I think that the best example of future behavior is past behavior. What he's going to do is he's going to cut schools more. He's going to take more money out of our proven job creating program, our transportation plan. That is not how we are going to continue to grow our state. I have a common sense plan that I believe Democrats and Republicans can support to get us out of this mess, and that's where we need to head.
Mr. Brownback. Dennis Depew, former president of Kansas Association School Board, said this: "It is disingenuous and factually untrue to claim that K-12 spending has suffered massive cuts in the last 5 years. In fact, the opposite is true, with the addition of over $500 million in spending from 2010 to 2015. The cuts came from Paul Davis prior to my becoming governor of the state of Kansas. And yes, we have cut taxes. And we've cut them so we could get growth happening. And the growth is happening. We are growing 3 times faster private sector jobs on the Kansas side of Kansas City as on the Missouri side, because the taxes are lower and people can grow more here. And that's what we're seeing. And let's deal with another fact. June 30th, 2010, 6 months before I come into office, the state ended its fiscal year with $876.05 in the bank account. We ended this last fiscal year, June 30th, 2014, with $443 million cash on hand, and improving the fiscal situation of our CAPER system, which they had let go into near bankruptcy zone, to where we're above that and about middle of the pack for states. We have made substantial improvements to the budget of the state, and we are growing, and we are creating jobs in this state. 58,000 new private sector jobs in the last 4 years. Shelling off income, moving people forward, getting them off of welfare and onto the work rolls, and it is working for the state of Kansas, and we've got the money to prove it.
Next question. Gentlemen, the Public Policy Council here believes the state may be shifting away from its traditional reliance on a set of 3 taxes: the sales tax, the property tax, and the income tax. We'll start with you, Mr. Davis, on this one. What are your views on this tax policy in the state of Kansas?
Well, we have traditionally subscribed to, Mike, what you refer to as the 3-legged stool. And some say that the stool is a little wobbly these days, and some say it's just been completely knocked over. You know, 2 years ago, I put a plan on the table, the same year that the governor put his tax plan on the table. That plan would have cut property taxes in a reasonable and responsible way, and it would have restored the cuts that have been made to our public schools. We have a school finance lawsuit that's before us right now, and I lived through the last one, and I didn't really want to live through another one. So I thought, let's get out in front of it. But Governor Brownback has taken a wholly different approach, and he has brought us this real live experiment of a tax policy that simply isn't working. His own Council of Economic Advisors several months ago documented that the state of Kansas is lagging behind our surrounding states in virtually every economic growth indicator there is. And Governor, if you want to compare Kansas and Missouri, the Kansas City Star did a pretty good analysis on this recently, and they have actually gained more private sector jobs during this last year on the bordering counties in Missouri than Kansas. You know, people in Topeka would like to take credit for what you've done here in Johnson County, but this is your model that you built. It's a successful model, and what we need to do is help you grow that model, and that means funding our public schools and funding our infrastructure program that's going to help you grow jobs here in Johnson County.
Mr. Brownback.
And I would say it would be not taking another $1 billion out of Johnson County to implement Obamacare, which Representative Davis wants to do. And this is where he's going to come for that money, is to come here to take that money out of this economy. And what we have said, we want you to invest your money here. And why do you think we've got all this construction happening in Johnson County? And why is there so much more growth here than on the other side of the line? 3 times faster private sector growth. You've got great schools, and we've got a better tax structure here. And people are moving rapidly. We're building office space here so people can move into Johnson County and to be able to take advantage of the situation that's here. Moving forward, I want us to grow. That's what I'm focused on. I want to see us grow. When Bob Dole first ran for office, we had 6 congressional districts in the state of Kansas. Bob Dole may run again. We're down to 4, headed to 3 congressional districts if we don't change the trajectory of this state. And that's what we've done with tax policy, is to put ourselves in a more competitive position. And now we're getting people moving into Kansas from all the surrounding states but Colorado. Colorado still has a lower income tax than Kansas does, and it still has higher mountains than we do. But we are growing, and we're attracting people from around the area, and we're attracting wealth from Missouri, too, into Kansas. This is the right direction for us to go, is to get that income tax down. We've got it from 6.45 to 4.8. Paul Davis wants to raise it on people that make $15,000 a year. He wants to raise the income tax on them.
Mr. Umbehr.
Well, the question was about our state's tax policy. What you heard was not the answer to those 2 questions. Before we talk about anything else, like I said earlier, we have to talk about our taxes. Our tax policy right now allows 191,000 business owners to pay 0, while 1.4 million wage earners pay it all. It's through the tax policy that all other policies that affect our state flow. So we have to afford, through a legislative enactment, and the Kansas Fair Tax Bill is this legislative enactment that zeroes out the income tax for the wage earners. When 1.4 million wage earners have their taxes back in their pockets, they're going to go out and spend it. That causes economic growth, that causes businesses to staff up, means hire more employees to meet the demand. Currently, when Governor Brownback's plan gave 191,000 of us our tax break, so we don't pay taxes, the expectation was we're going to go out and hire employees for no particular reason. That's wrong. Economic growth comes first by giving more people disposable income in their pockets. 1.4 million people is the economic engine for our state. That's what the question was. That's what the answer is.
Thank you. Candidates, listen carefully for a second. Other than talking about tax policy, other than the tax policy, talk to us a little bit about your approach towards economic development, economic growth, and jobs. And the council wants to hear you talk about economic incentives. And we'll start with Mr. Brownback.
Well, we've done very well, particularly recently in this area on economic growth and use of incentives, and also having a very good tax policy. Last week announced AIG expanding 300 to 1,000 new jobs in this area, in the Olathe area, which is fabulous. Last week did the ribbon cutting on IKEA, which is a fabulous story. I hope some of you get out to it. It will be a tourist attraction. Prairie Fire, the expansion, I've worked aggressively with them in that area. And not here in Johnson County, but in Wyandotte County, we're going to be the U.S. headquarters for soccer. with U.S. Soccer moving their training facility in there. Worked a long time to get that group there, and this is going to be a game changer for us to have that in the area. We've got record numbers of Kansans working. I believe we ought to use all the tools at our disposal, which include things like the PEAK program, and we ought to work with people in this room, which I've worked with many of you, to recruit businesses into this area so that we grow. What our tax policy is focused on is on growth. And I feel like this is kind of a 2 against 1, but what we're doing is saying, let's get growth in jobs. You get jobs here, we'll get more people into the state of Kansas. You take taxes off of small business, and what they tend to do is create jobs. And that's what they've been doing, is creating jobs. With big business, we have to use programs, and you pay for it. You pay to bring the big business into the area. For small business, they want a better tax policy, and that's what we gave them, and that's why you're seeing such growth in jobs, record numbers in the state of Kansas, and you guys are leading the way.
Mr. Umbehr.
I have to correct the governor. It's not 2 against 1. It's 1.4 million against the 1. This tax policy makes tax slaves out of 1.4 million wage earners. The way to economic growth is to put more money back in the wage earners' pockets. It's called trickle-up capitalism. When the wage earner has more money, they go out and buy more products and goods and services. That business owner then sees the increased need for his goods and services, and he staffs up. That's economic development. Businesses should be competing for customers, not more government programs like HPIP, Impact, and PEAK. Those programs actually steal money from the school districts. With a 10-year tax abatement, with the ability to for the business owner to retain 95% of their employees' state withholdings, that's taking money away. These programs are buying friends. They're not buying businesses, okay? And when the incentives are gone, they're gone. The way to economic growth is the same way it happened back in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Put more money in the people's pockets, the wage earners' pockets, and they will drive the economic growth in Kansas.
Mr. Davis.
Mike, I know you don't want to talk about taxes, but I have to say that the governor's one-size-fits-all tax plan is basically his economic plan. And instead of convening business leaders and community leaders when he became governor to design a plan that's going to work for our communities, diverse all across the state, he hired Art Laffer, a California ideologue, the father of trickle-down economics, and we paid him $75,000 of the taxpayers' money to design an economic program. First thing I did was I asked 2 former lieutenant governors, secretaries of commerce, and successful business people, Gary Scheer, a Republican, and John Moore, a Democrat, to head up our business advisory group. And we have brought together business leaders, Democrats and Republicans, small communities, large communities. And when I listen to them, what I hear uniformly is that this one-size-fits-all plan just isn't going to work. We have to understand that what works here in Johnson County is very different from what works in Garden City. And communities lead on economic development. And what we need to do is be a good partner of the state and help them with the basics. Here in Johnson County, the basics are great public schools and a robust transportation program. Governor Brownback has cut the schools, and he has taken $1 billion from the transportation program. And when we're $1.3 billion in debt over the next 5 years, guess what you're going to see more of? You're going to see more cuts to schools, and you're going to see more dollars taken over that proven way of creating jobs.
Speaking of which, let's talk about the schools for a second, gentlemen. Council wants to know what you believe to be the top 3 elements of what the state can do to promote good and even excellent education in the state of Kansas. And obviously, it's a very big issue here in Johnson County. Mr. Umbehr, we'll start with you.
You know, you hear Mr. Brownback and Mr. Davis talk about, I've increased funding, I've decreased funding, he's done this with funding. The base student aid is a small part of the overall funding formula that we use. Most of the funding comes from local school districts assessing property tax in their school district. That's where most of the funds come from. And so the base student aid is roughly, what, $4,400 now, is that correct? And I tell you what, let's just make $5,000. It really doesn't make any difference. The difference is what the local school boards decide to spend money on. Local school boards must have local control. They decide how much money is put in teacher salaries, how much money is put in new classroom materials. They're the ones, and that can't ever change. Now, there are rich school districts and there are poor school districts. And there are some districts out in western Kansas that absolutely refuse to raise property taxes because those board members ran on that platform. And that is the way it should be. And I don't think we should take money from Johnson County and spread it all around to every other school district who doesn't want to place a priority on education. So, you know, be careful. Whenever they're talking about increasing base student aid, they're taking money out of your pockets. They're looking at your pockets to take more money out of. So be very wary of that.
Mr. Davis.
You know, as the child of two teachers and the parent of a soon-to-be kindergartner, the issue of public education is very, very important for me. The first thing that we have to do is we have to get us on a path so that we can restore the cuts that have been made to our public schools. One of the other things that I think is very important out there is that we need to support our teachers. The single most influential factor in a child's education is a good school teacher. Governor Brownback earlier talked about how I voted against the school finance bill. I've introduced the very first school finance bill to address the court's decision. I voted for the bipartisan bill that many here in Johnson County were very involved in, and I supported the local authority component of that. But I voted against the final bill because Governor Brownback and his allies in the legislature decided to take a cheap shot at the 35,000 public school teachers that we have in this state. It had no place being in that bill. And school teachers all across this state have just felt beaten down. And we have to stop doing that. We have to start supporting our school teachers, start supporting our schools, and give them the resources that they need. And I want to end with reiterating that point from the Overland Park Chamber's legislative platform. Educational excellence is one of the single most important reasons companies have selected Johnson County as their place of business. We all know it.
Mr. Brownback.
I'm the product of public education in this state. Prairie View High School, a little district south of here. K-State, KU. My oldest daughter teaches 5th grade math. Great teacher. My oldest son wants to go into the profession, into the university teaching level. He's getting his PhD this year in economics and wants to teach. I believe in public education. I believe education is transformative. I believe teachers transform people. And I've been transformed by teachers. By Gary Harvey, my ag teacher in high school, and by teachers that I've had all along the way. I believe in the system, and that's why we put record amounts of money in the system. I also believe you ought to have some local control. And that's why I fought and signed the local option budget, which Representative Davis voted against and didn't propose in his own proposal. He's against you keeping your own money to upgrade your own places. He was against the local activities budget that you had proposed sometime in the past. What he's talking about, when he's talking about money to schools, is your money but not your schools, and putting it in other places, and that's been his consistent voting record. Now that's fine, but that's his position. Steve Rose wrote about this bill that passed this year, quote, Kansas school funding bill is a huge win for Johnson County. On local control, he said, it has been the mantra for 3 decades and it finally came to pass. Hats off to those who voted for the bill and for the governor who signed it.
Let's talk now a little bit, gentlemen, about higher education. What do you foresee or what do you envision as the role of state government in higher education, including things like providing better or broader access to the universities, to the Kansas Community College system, and to the technical schools? And on this question, let's start with Mr. Davis.
You know, our higher education institutions in this state are our engines of economic opportunity. You have a great community college right here, Johnson County Community College, that is the 3rd largest university in the state of Kansas, if you want to look at the number of students that are enrolled there. And there are great things that are going on there. We have to continue to support our institutions of higher learning. The problem, once again, is Governor Brownback 2 years ago was running around the state, and he was coming to our state universities, and he said that, you know, higher education is critically important. We can't cut it. There was talk in the legislature about reducing support for higher education. But then when it came time for him to match his rhetoric with action, he signed $66 million of cuts to our higher education institutions in a year when all of our surrounding states invested more in higher education. That just doesn't make sense. If we are going to grow as a state, we have to be supporting our institutions of education, early childhood education, K through 12 education, higher education. And we've also got to do something about the out-of-control tuition that is resulting in this. When Governor Brownback's cuts were signed, the Board of Regents raised tuition. Too many kids right now are getting priced out of a college education and walking away with debt that they can't pay off. We've got to stop that trend.
Mr. Brownback.
Higher education funding has increased $50 million since I've been in office. Paul Davis has voted against virtually every one of those increases. We're building a new medical education building at KU Med, which is improving its rankings at KU Med, and Governor Parkinson pushed for increased rankings. I'm pushing for those as well, and that's a key thing for us to do. Representative Davis voted against that budget to pay for the expansion of the medical education building. We need to build the NBAP facility in Manhattan, Kansas to continue our animal health corridor in this area. This is a one-of-a-kind facility, $1.2 billion federal, local, federal, state match. Again, Representative Davis votes against the budget to be able to have us bond that authority and to be able to have that facility here. He talks a great game. He's been walking away from it ever since. We are going to continue to support higher education in the state of Kansas. We're going to continue to grow higher education in the state of Kansas. We're going to grow it particularly in our key economic driver regions, aviation industry around Wichita State University, the medical sciences here, the engineering overall, the animal health corridor. We have invested in those. We've invested heavily, and it's paid off with improved rankings and additional students. We need more engineers. I'm sitting at this table here with Paul. What we've got of an engineering center here in Kansas City, we need more engineers. And we're increasing the number of engineering graduates from Kansas universities. Those are the sort of things we're going to continue to invest in because you need a high quality, high product, higher education, and it's improving, particularly with Fred Logan, the local here, is a former chairman of the Board of Regents that I appointed.
Mr. Umbehr.
Well, let's go back to the original question. What is the state responsibility to higher education? We do have a responsibility. You've heard two politicians talk about we have to add more support. We have to add more resources. What does that really mean? That means we need to tax the people of Kansas more to subsidize tuition at our higher education. That's what it means. The question is, our duty is to K through 12 first. And the money that we give to lower tuition, does it really lower tuition? Do we keep dumping money in higher education and not expect efficiencies? Do we force the universities in Kansas to be efficient with the money that we give them? No, we don't. We close our eyes and we tax you. We tax the wage earner. We tax investments. We tax everything that moves, lives, or breathes so we can, fund, support, add more resources to higher education. There comes a point in time where we have to stop doing that. We have to make the universities responsible for the money they spend. And I have never seen tuition go down in any of our regents' universities, and that's just not the way business works. Education is a business. Higher education is a really big business. They have to be efficient with the money that we give them. Right now, the next budget year is going to be very difficult, and there won't be any more money sent to higher education unless they want to raise taxes, and I will not raise taxes.
Candidates, let's talk about healthcare policy for a second. What are your views on the implementation of the Affordable Health Care Act? What are your views on the potential expansion of Medicaid in the state? Your thoughts on this in general, and Mr. Brownback, we'll start with you.
Thanks for the question. I oppose Obamacare. I opposed it in the U.S. Senate. I've opposed it as governor. It was a huge transfer take from Medicare into Obamacare. It's not working. If it was working, the Obama administration that authored it would be implementing it, and they're not. You haven't seen the big hammer yet from Obamacare. It's coming after the election cycle. Representative Davis wanted us to be an early implementer of Obamacare. It's going to cost $1 billion in Kansas to implement it, and that's going to come out of your pockets. That's where it has to come from. I don't think that's the way for us to go. The right route, I believe, for us to do was CanCare, which Dr. Collier was the one that implemented, which Representative Davis supported until I started running for governor. CanCare was a program where we could get our system in place and offer more services and take in more people and still bend our cost curve down, because it was an integrated care system. We've added 80,000 people to Medicaid in the state of Kansas under CanCare. We've added services. We've added preventive dental services and bariatric and heart transplants back in. I met with a lady that got a heart transplant paid for out of CanCare who wouldn't have gotten it, and unless she moved to another state, may have died without that service. We've expanded those services. We've expanded the people we're covering. But you cannot, and we cannot afford to do the Obamacare $1 billion on a program that's not working and hasn't shown any indication of being able to, or the administration would have implemented it.
Mr. Umbehr?
This may shock some of you what I'm about to say next, but I do support Governor Brownback's beliefs on ACA. It is a job-killing, nation-killing, health insurance, health care killing program. It is going to fail, and we need to be there for what comes afterwards. We're advocating the direct primary care model. We must separate health care from health insurance. Let me give you an example. How many of you people would buy auto insurance and expect to have gas, oil, and tires paid for by your insurance? Well, that's what we do with health care. Every little thing has to go through the health insurance, and that is a crazy way to run it. And our plan is direct primary care. Atlas MD, my Lieutenant Governor, Dr. Josh Umbehr, runs a clinic down in Wichita. It's $50 a month for most adults, $10 for kids, no copay, no deductible, unlimited visits. When you walk out of the clinic, you walk out with your prescription in your hand at 5% over wholesale. Any doctor in the state of Kansas could do this. If CanCare would add that in to their health care for our 400,000 recipients for CanCare, it will save them $1 billion right off the bat. And every doctor in Kansas would jump on that and serve CanCare patients. That's the answer. Private business, private enterprise, entrepreneurship is the answer, not another government program.
Mr. Davis?
You know, Obamacare has got lots of problems. There is no doubt about it. And wouldn't it be nice if President Obama and Congress would get their act together and they would fix what's wrong with the Affordable Care Act. But let's talk about what we have to deal with right here in Kansas. Let's talk about CanCare, Governor. I looked out in the audience and I see Finn Bullard sitting out here. Many of you know Finn. He's been here in Johnson County for a long time. What CanCare did to Finn was truly awful. Finn needs 24-hour care. If he loses his ventilator, he will be dead within minutes. And CanCare cut off his 24-hour care to try to save a few bucks. That is wrong. This system is not working. You know, Governor, I had high hopes at first. I wanted it to work. But it's just not working. We've got for-profit insurance companies that have not met any of the benchmarks that have been set out for them. But let's also talk about the other looming healthcare crisis that we have in this state. Governor Brownback signed a bill during this last session that would allow the state of Kansas to take over Medicare. Governor Jan Brewer in Arizona saw that same bill on her desk, and she hit the veto stamp. She said the state of Arizona has no business being in the Medicare business. Neither does the state of Kansas. I would have vetoed that bill as governor. The 450,000 Kansas seniors that are on Medicare don't need the state of Kansas to take over their Medicare.
Candace, what are your views about the state's energy policy? And we'd like to see you or hear you talk a little bit about the current renewable energy standards that are in place in the state of Kansas. And I believe this is going to be Mr. Umbehr.
Right. I am absolutely for the phase out of the RPS, the Kansas Renewable Portfolio Standards. It's a great plan at first. We got screwed in the deal. We didn't get the Holcomb plant. Most of that energy goes out of state anyways. And with a lifetime tax abatement for each one of those towers, that is robbing school districts. If they were the good neighbors they purport to be, they would pay that income or the property tax on that each tower, and that money could go directly to fund schools. I am for phasing out with that first bit of property tax going to schools. If the RPS has nothing more to do than produce green energy and cost us more money, our rates are going to go up 9%, so we can be green. But you know what? Okay, let's do the green energy thing, but let's make that as a business like any other business. RPS picked winners and losers, and when they were granted a lifetime tax, property tax abatement, that's just not fair for any business. I'm phased out immediately, starting in 2015, with that first money going to the school districts. That's how we're going to fund school districts.
Mr. Davis.
I support our renewable portfolio standard, and I fought off many attempts during the last legislative session to repeal it. You know, there's a company right here in Johnson County called Trade Wind Energy, and they're in the wind business. I want to see more wind jobs in Kansas. We are the second windiest state in the country, and it's not just because of the three of us up here. But we are lagging far behind that in terms of the capacity that we are generating. Without an RPS, we are sending a very strong message to the wind industry that Kansas is not open for business. We would be the first state in the country to repeal its RPS. We need this. I want those jobs. I want to see Trade Wind Energy add more employees. I want to see more Trade Wind Energies coming to Kansas. I want to see more Siemens like we have in Hutchinson. Governor Brownback used to support the RPS. A few months ago he said he'd phase it out in the morning, and in the afternoon he said, well, no, I didn't really mean that. And now he's saying he wants to phase it out again. Mr. Umbehr, I appreciate you candidly answering this question. And I asked the governor several times at the state fair debate, will you veto a bill that repeals the renewable portfolio standard if that hits your desk? I will do that. What's your answer, Governor?
Go ahead, Doug.
This is really amazing to me because Paul opposed the RPS when it was first proposed, and now is for it. So I guess you can flip back and forth that way if you'd like to. What I have said is I want to see all sides come together, and if they come together around some proposal that says we want to do something different, like a tax credit, I could go with that. If they say not, I'm not going to do it. I want the sides to come together because that's how you move things forward in Kansas, is you bring people together to get things done. Unlike you, where you just said, I'm going to set it this way, and that's the way it's going to be. I supported all of the above energy strategy for the state of Kansas. We are an energy state. We have a lot we can do in energy in this state, where a lot we are doing. I've been one of the lead proponents of wind energy around this country, and we have doubled the wind energy production in this state since I've been governor. We've added $3 billion of wind energy, and I recruited a number of those companies and worked with them in bringing that wind energy into the state of Kansas. In our future, we're probably going to export a lot of wind energy, and we're going to need the channels to be able to export that. But we also need oil and gas, and we need clean coal technology, and we need the nuclear technology in this state as well. And on top of all that, we've got to hold down our utility rates. We can't afford this aggressive, high-cost Obama regulatory regime that's driving up your utility prices in the state of Kansas. They added a cost of $1.2 billion to the Lucene power plant and did negligible changes on its impact on the environment, but you've got to pay the $1.2 billion.
Candidates, thank you very much for your answers. We have reached the stage in this forum where it's time now for closing arguments by the candidates. According to the rules, each of these three gentlemen will get 4 minutes. So you got some time, fellows. 4 minutes to make your closing arguments. And we drew this by lot first. We're going to begin with Mr. Umbehr.
Thank you very much. If there's one issue that should be the defining issue when you go into the voting booth to vote is, do we have a fair income tax plan? If you decide that it's not fair that 1.4 million pay taxes while the 191,000 of the business owners don't, if you don't think that's fair, you are duty bound to make a choice other than Mr. Brownback. I'm asking you to vote for the Libertarian candidate because we have a plan. The Kansas Fair Tax will replace that money. It will be fair. It will fund all state obligations. It is something that Kansas, we're known for being fair. Fair first. It's fair to the masses. It's fair to the 1.4 million to go to work every day. It's fair to their families. It's fair to me as a business owner. Consumption tax is, if I want to pay more taxes, I'll buy more goods. If I don't want to pay more taxes, I won't buy more goods. But at least it puts our state on a track where our spending is tied to our GDP. The legislature has a unique problem in 2016. They're all up for election. 125 seats, 147 seats. I'm elected governor in January 2015. The legislature's not going to slap their head and say, "Oh, Umbehr, you were so right. We were so misguided when we passed this Governor Brownback's tax plan. Sure, we're going to pass the Kansas fair tax." They're not going to do that. No way. But I'm going to set a priority, and I have stated this many times before, but I will tell the legislature, you fix this tax plan first. First and foremost. It'll probably take you all 90 days to do it. Otherwise, I veto every single piece of legislation they put before me. This is the central issue. This is the most important issue. This is the issue that affects 1.4 million wage earners in Kansas, and it has to become fair. We can no longer have the wage earners in this state be the tax slaves of the Kansas legislature. So, let me repeat, I veto every bill until they fix this first. Fix this tax plan, make it equal, one session. They gave it to the business owners in one session, they can give it to the wage earners in one session. It'll be a total paradigm shift for the legislature. But that's what I stand for, that's what I'm going to do, and I will not back away from that. So when you go to November, ask yourself that question, and then vote accordingly. I hope to earn your trust and your vote. Thank you.
Libertarian candidate Keen Umbehr. By lot and drawing, Mr. Davis, Democratic candidate for governor.
Thank you all again for joining us here today. A few years ago, some friends told me about how they were going to move from the Missouri side of the border over to Kansas. They had kids that were starting to get to school age, and they wanted to take advantage of those great Kansas City, those great Johnson County schools. I've heard this story over and over again, and I know most of you have as well. Many of you are probably part of those stories. But we're going to be hearing fewer and fewer of those stories, because folks are going to be hearing about that teacher that I met a couple of weeks ago in Shawnee Mission, who's got over 30 kids in her class and can't even get a paraprofessional. They're going to hear about the $1.3 billion of debt that Governor Brownback's economic experiment has put us in, and wonder how in the world are they going to restore funding for those public schools. They're going to hear about that Kauffman Foundation study that has Kansas 45th in the country in new business creation. They're going to hear about the fact that in 2013, more businesses closed shop in our state than opened. The governor's economic experiment isn't working, and it's not going to work. The choice we have in this election is whether we're going to acknowledge that, whether we're going to clean up the mess, whether we're going to get our fiscal house in order as a state, whether we're going to restore the cuts to our public schools, and whether we're going to use proven ways to grow our economy. Or are we going to hit the accelerator, as the governor says, on a failed economic experiment that is going to lead to more cuts in schools, more dollars taken away from our proven job creating program, and more cuts for other state programs. In order to meet these challenges that we have to do so in a bipartisan way. I have a 12-year record of being able to bring Democrats and Republicans together. That's why I have the support of over 100 current and former Republican elected officials. Unprecedented. It's never happened in Kansas before. That's why my administration will be the most bipartisan administration that the state of Kansas has ever seen. Because I don't believe that all the good ideas are in one particular political party. I think we can find them in all political parties, and we can bring people from all political parties together to confront the challenges that we have. You know, today the governor gave you a lot of excuses and did a little name calling and blamed a lot of others for the problems that he's created. But what we need is somebody who understands the needs of the business community. I'm a 15-year member of my Chamber of Commerce. I've helped people start businesses, and I've done that right up to working with some of the largest companies in this state. The governor, last time he was on a private sector payroll, the Kansas City Royals were defending their World Series championship in 1986. I'm a Royals fan, and that was a long time ago. We need to restore the cuts that have been made to our public schools. We need to use proven ways to grow our economy, and we need to do all of this bringing Kansans together, Democrats and Republicans, working in a bipartisan way. We've done it before. and we can absolutely do it again. I thank you very much for being here today. I thank all the chambers for the role that they play in helping make our state a better state. And I ask for your vote on November 4th. Thank you very much.
Mr. Brownback.
It would have helped that Shawnee Mission teacher if you voted for the local option budget. That was more money for them. You did not vote for that. It failed your test. You didn't support the local option budget. When he's talking about money for schools, he's talking about, not about your schools, but he's talking about your money. I want to thank you for being here today. Paul and Keen, I want to thank you as well for this discussion. Elections are about choices and directions, and you're hearing three different directions here. Certainly between Paul and myself, I'm a Reagan-style Republican, and he is an Obama-style Democrat. He's been a two-time Obama delegate. He supported tax increases across the board. That's fine. That's a political philosophy. It's a philosophy you have to determine if that's what you want to elect and put in position as governor. And that's your choice, and that's what the choice that the people will have in the state of Kansas. Johnson County is a fabulous place. It has been so good at growing and helping this state prosper and move forward. I want to see you continue to do that. I think the keys are the things that you focus on. Great schools with a local option budget and us putting more money in schools. Great roads, which we're investing heavily in right now and going to continue to invest heavily in those roads, and get an economy in a position on our taxes that we can grow. That's why we cut the taxes on small business, because small business creates jobs. And they've been creating them here in Johnson County, and you've been creating them at a rapid rate. And that creates a situation where we're growing. And as the economy grows, you have more tax revenues to use and put into the system. And you can go Mr. Davis and the Obama route, and you say, we're going to tax people more. And that'll work for a little while. But after a while, then people go somewhere else. And they say, I'm going to go somewhere else where there's less taxes. What we want is them coming here and saying, I'm going to put roots here, and that's what's taking place. And then the growth moves on forward, and then we've got more funds for schools and more opportunities for our people. And we've got chances for people to move back. And that's why we're having the Kansas comeback that's taking place now. And people moving back to Kansas, and people moving in from surrounding states instead of moving out like they were doing. It's because we've got a vibrant economy moving forward, and much of that headquartered right here in Johnson County. Now is not the time to go back to a high tax rate state. We were the second highest income tax rate state in the area before I came into office. Now we're second lowest. Well, we were the highest, and now we're second lowest. And that was an income tax cut for everybody. We've taken it down on everybody. I want to keep bringing those on down as we grow. And invest heavily in schools, and invest heavily in higher education, and invest heavily in the highways. And we can and we are doing that. With Paul Davis, you're going to get a tax commission, they're going to propose tax increases, and it's going to come out of your pocket. And if you think that's going to help you grow, okay, that's a choice. That's a choice that you make, and you decide that that's the route that you want to go. I don't think it's the way we grow. I know it's not the way we grow. And I want to keep investing as well in those other areas that we had grow so well in this area. Animal Health Corridor, the Johnson County Gateway, the Intermodal Logistics Park that I've worked with on all those different things. We can do this, guys. You don't have to go back to the high tax model. But we've got to do it over growth. We've got to work our taxes down and grow. And you do those working together, and that's why it's been successful, and that's why we're moving forward, and that's why we're growing on the Kansas side of Kansas City so much faster than the Missouri side in private sector jobs. That's what you want to grow. And that's what we're doing. And that's why I asked for another 4 years, because this is working. And we're bringing people in here, and we're going to continue to grow and prosper as a state. A lot of it in Johnson County, where you guys have done so well. Thanks for being here. God bless you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our three candidates.